Philippe, is there racism against Ethiopian Jews? Get us on point with that.
So on the one hand, I'm not a member of that community, and I don't want to trivialize what they're going through, in particular with the police. On the other hand, I don't think that every inequality is synonymous with racism. There's definitely going to be cases of racism in Israel, but Israel is not a society like the United States today, where you have, let's say, one big dominant group. It's more like the United States in the late 1800s, early 1900s. You have a number of different communities competing. And for a number of reasons, the Ethiopians have not yet matched up with the rest, or with the average in terms of economics and jobs. But there has been tremendous success too. So if there is racism, at least in my experience and from what I can tell, it is not a pervasive thing in the country. There may be an exception for the police, but even there, I'm not really sure.
Now, they make about 2% of Israel's population. You mentioned Israel is very diverse, but they say it's the reason that they are being targeted, the reason there's such socioeconomic gaps is because they have a darker skin tone. They don't look like the typical white Israeli, the white Jewish person. Is there any element of that? I mean, you would know better than anyone. You've actually lived in Israel, been in Israel.
Yes. So there is no typical white Israeli. That's the point I'm trying to convey. And again, not to minimize the discrimination a lot of the members of this communities might have faced, but my own family comes from a North African background, and there were a large immigration wave to Israel in the 1950s, and they faced an uphill battle. And the tendency to want to translate that uphill battle or setbacks to discrimination, I think plays a bad trick on the community that's trying to advance. I hope that this movement is more for empowerment than victimhood. The Ethiopian community has not attained its full potential yet. I think that's normal. They've only been in Israel for a while, but they've had an uphill battle because of specific cultural reasons, religious traditions. They come from a world that is not necessarily the best equipped to deal with the Israeli economy being so focused on technology. There's a lot of different factors, and I would suspect racism is not a leading one. Again, possibly with the exception of the police. I don't know. But in my experience, I've never once, with the thousands of people I know in Israel, heard anti-black statements. It's not something that's common there. It's a very different history than from the United States.
And well, I would also talk about the United States, being that I am an American and I see what's going on in Baltimore right now. I see every time there's an incident of anyone with a darker skin tone, they immediately jump to the race card. That's not saying that it doesn't happen sometimes, but that's the first trigger that we pull right there is, yes, it must be because they are this color X, Y, Z. But I want to move on now because we're talking about Ethiopian Jews. A lot of people don't know the history. They're not familiar. What was Operation Moses, and how was that impacted the makeup, I would say, of Israel?
Okay, great. Thanks for the question. So the Ethiopian Jewish community is an ancient one. It traces its history back to King Solomon. And in 1984, there was a famine in Ethiopia, and there had always been a strong movement to return to Jerusalem in their tradition and the Jewish values they had. And there was an operation planned by the Mossad, by the Israeli intelligence services, to evacuate the Ethiopian community in one fell swoop, or a large part of it, after they had crossed Sudan in secret. And they were airlifted to Israel. And that was only 1984. Another big part of the community was brought in 1991. And considering that and the uphill battle culturally to acclimatize to such a fast-paced society, I think there's been tremendous successes. The leader of the medical mission to Nepal now, the aid mission that Israel sent, which is sizable, is an Ethiopian-Israeli surgeon, for example. So I would also try to balance, what the shortcomings with positive news. I don't think playing the race card, even though it might be valid sometimes, but I don't think raising that issue to the exclusion of all others is going to help anybody. It didn't help my community.
I don't think so in any circumstance, in any nation in the world. I don't think throwing the race card at everything is advantageous for anyone's cause. Makes you like a victim. But let's move on now to some of the claims that they're making. They said that when they did immigrate to Israel, they were questioned on their Jewish credentials. Could you speak to that a little bit for me, Philippe?
Yes, I think that was unfortunate, and a lot of unfortunate things have happened. I don't want to minimize the difficulties they've undergone. I'm just saying racism, I don't think, is the main cause. When they moved to Israel, the ultra-Orthodox community exerts a very strong influence in Israeli politics, even though they're a minority. And some were questioning the Judaism of these people who had been so long detached from the mainstream of Judaism. And to benefit from immediate immigration in the state of Israel, anybody can immigrate, but to benefit from immediate immigration, you need to prove you have at least one Jewish grandparent. So there was some question about, are these people really Jews, which I find unfortunate, but I think it was pretty quickly resolved. One ultra-Orthodox rabbi said, yes, they had to go through some formal process of merging with mainstream Orthodox Judaism. And that question, from what I understand, would put to rest. The consequences are that they felt ostracized. And I think one of the biggest problems is that the welfare programs that were set up to allow them to integrate but keep their traditions, in fact, kept them apart. So the well-meaning, more liberal kind of policies ended up playing a disservice to them. And what I saw in the protest, maybe it's what I want to see, is people who want to be enfranchised fully and actually compete. They were protesting with flags, with uniforms on. They want to be part of the mainstream. So hopefully the victimhood aspect of it will not trump.